Well, so before we get going, the first announcement that I have is how many of you have checked grades that I have put in for you? All right. Have you also read the comments? Okay. Well, I was going to keep that secret, but now that you threw it out, yeah. It's not that you need to learn to spell. You need to remember to use and spell check. Let the technology help you. Don't ever turn something in that you have not spell checked. That's a crime. That's a crime, okay? I mean, if you do spell check and spell check doesn't pick up on it, okay, so that means you didn't read through it, or maybe you didn't know the difference. That's fine. But if you don't do spell check, oh, it's a major crime. All right. Do you have any questions about what we did last week? Everybody's smart, everybody's intelligent, and everybody's up to date. You've watched the videos. Okay, I'm going to tell you there's a few more coming. All right, so you're going to need to budget some time. The only way I can get you through everything is to split it between what we do in class and what you do at home. Okay, if we had longer class times or we met more often, I'd be able to do all of this in class. But I want to make sure you get a fair amount of this education. I don't want you to feel like you didn't get enough. It should not be necessary unless it's your computer. That shouldn't make, yeah. Has it been restarted?
No, yesterday it did the same thing.
Yeah, but it wasn't restarted yesterday either. See, as these things stay on, sure. Okay. You're going to make me trip. All right. We're in a process of getting all of these hardwired. If you find that you have a cable coming into your computer and it's coming out of the desk, please leave it. That is by design. Okay? That is by design. In fact, there should be two of them back there. So I don't know who unplugged the other one. Anyway, don't worry about it. Somebody pulled it out already. That means somebody's pissing me off. To put it mildly. Whoa, are you concerned that I might think you did it? That's right. Don't mess with my computer or my cables. Yeah. So we're going to start today with something I'm going to do every time we meet, at least once a day. I'd like to know what's going on here. Why? Yeah, turn your phones off. Oh, the computers don't make that sound. Oh, your Apple. Something's going on with my computer today, too. Yeah. Okay, backup plan. This is my backup plan. All right. So follow me to class 1 and 2 for today. And here's the first thing we're going to do. I would normally I'm going to do is I'm going to have this on before you come into class. It's called the A+ question of the day. And here's how we do this. I'll put it on before you come in. And then as you come in, if you do not know the answer, you look up the answer. You try to find the answer. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. And what I want you to do is to try and answer this question. Okay? Like I said, if you don't know it, you try to look up, and then in a minute, I'm going to put up a question using a program called Socrative. You just click on that link, and then you'll be able to put in the code, which is room TDC Smith, and then we will see who's right and who's not right. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. They are coming from there, but they also pertain to what we're doing in this class. Yes. Mm-hmm. Take a look at the board, and you can see that on a standard motherboard, we have ISA slots. These were the original expansion card slots, and they were called industry standard. Okay. Then we had AGP, which is your accelerated graphics. And then we have your newest version. And why do you suppose the new ones are smaller than the big ones? Exactly. So we are able to do just that. We are able to save space. Okay? So I'm going to hold up and pass around this motherboard, which looks very similar, if not identical, to this one. Okay? All right? Only difference is it has one less ISA, and this one has one more PCI. PCI comes in two formats. What are they? PCI and PCIe. Now, okay, which one is larger? PCI. That's the first version. PCIe is the new version, and it's actually smaller than these white ones that we see on this. Okay. Once again, as I pass around the board for you to look at, and you can look very closely, you'll see that it says PCI 1, PCI 2, PCI, actually it says, yeah, PCI 3 and 4 and 5. And then if you look really close on the board, you can find the names. You'll see it AGP over here, it'll be a slot. And then you'll see ISA at the bottom of these. So it's printed right on the circuit board. There are sharp parts. Be careful. ISA, with the introduction of PCI, ISA became more or less obsolete. All right. Also, this was only 16-bit. All right. So you didn't have very much speed through the bus. That's only 16. I think it's at least 32, 64, and the new ones could be up to 128. No, I don't. That's a good question. You could check. I'm sure there's something you can check online for that. All right. Okay, so with that, we'll do one of these a day. Hopefully we can do it a little quicker, because what I'm going to do is have it up before class starts, and then right as class starts, I'll close it and we'll see the results. I'll do a better job of showing you your graph and how many people got it right. The majority of you did get it correctly, although ISA threw off a good portion of people because they forgot that what is ATX? ATX is a form factor for the motherboard. That is what that is, not a bus. All right, let's see. If I go back over here. All right, there we go. Now let me get back into position. The next thing we're going to do is what we normally do, which you should be aware of by now, and that is we're going to go to the motherboard NearPod presentation. Okay, there it is. Now, once again, as we do the motherboard NearPod presentation, here you guys, keep one of these motherboards or pass it around to people around you so that everyone has something to refer to in person. I've got 3 of them on the floor right now, okay? You don't have to pass the same one to everybody, but just keep one locally around you. Try to identify things on the board. Try to ask questions about things on the board that you don't understand. Our goal today is very much aware of the motherboard. Now, if everything goes according to plan, I will be able to do this. And you now see a motherboard on your screen, right? Look at the size of that heat sink. That's serious, isn't it? All right, let's go. Take a look at this picture. Here is and now match this up if you can with a motherboard that you have, or it's near you if you have one. You can turn around and look at somebody's motherboard. You can share, or you can just use the picture. I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner. Is everybody with me? Here you can see the difference between PCI Express and a regular PCI. Do you see the difference? It's pretty small, isn't it? So what we've done is we found a way to put fewer pins on the card. That means we have more room on the motherboard for things, or we can make it smaller. Okay? Next to the PCI is the AGP. So what's missing? ISA. ISA is missing. Okay? All right, so this is a newer motherboard. The what? They may not be on any of the boards you have because these are older boards. Okay? If you were to look at a newer tower computer with a newer board, you'd probably find it. Okay? All right, moving on. At the right of AGP is a 3-pin fan connector. That means that there is a cable coming off the power supply, and I brought a power supply in so you could see all the different cables that are on a power supply. Okay? Now the fan won't have it. The fan will have its own cable, right? Okay? This is just the power supply, but you can see that most of the wires go to this Molex connection, and this is your main power connection, and this is another power connection that goes to a different part of the board. Okay, right? Then you have these different connections, and these are power connections for what? Not the front panel, but your hard drives, your DVD. Okay, these are power for them. Okay, got it? Because everything else comes off the motherboard, and power is provided here. So then you would plug a cable like a SATA cable into the motherboard, not into the power supply. And the power supply supplies different voltages to different places. Okay, that's why we have these different and different lengths, because they have to go all the way around inside the computer to get to different areas. Sometimes you have to take a power supply, and after you figure out where everything goes, you're going to have to strap the cables up in clean and easy to work with. Okay, pass that around. All right, moving to the right, we have the back panel. What does I/O stand for? On and off is one thing. In this case, it means input, output, in and out. And anybody from California? In-N-Out Burger? Best burger in the world. Oh, Whataburger's. Oh, Five Guys. Oh, Five Guys doesn't know how to do a burger. It's the best you can get out here. Sorry, but it's there's no way to explain it. There's no way to explain it. First off, you walk into the store and they literally make everything from scratch. So yeah, they shape the burger, they cook the burger, the fries they put through a big potato press, they take real potatoes. I mean, oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's the same as everybody else. It's overpriced. Oh yeah. Okay, we're getting off. Back panel and input output, we're going to look at those separately in a few minutes, so I'll come back to those. Moving to the right, we have a heat sink. Notice that heat sink is not on the CPU. That heat sink is on another powerful processor called, no. Go ahead and guess, folks. It's okay to be wrong. One is called and the other one's called and it's the North Bridge. Give it up. North Bridge. North Bridge, as you will learn, is another processor that controls information from the CPU to very powerful components. The South Bridge works with the CPU to calculate and move data to lesser important functions. All right, so moving over, do you see the next one, the P4? All right, P4 was the little white plug on the power supply. The second power plug that I told you about. Okay, there was a big 20 pin and then there's a small 4 pin. Why do they go to different parts of the computer to the motherboard? Different voltages. Okay, different voltages. Next is something called an inductor. And below that is called a capacitor. Okay, now if you look for these on the board, you can find the capacitors. They look like little water towers. All right, little round things. And the inductor, if I'm not mistaken, will look like, yeah, they're like green with copper cable around them. Yeah, okay. Next, we have the CPU socket. We call it a socket because our CPU is actually removable and replaceable. And there are two kinds of CPU designs on the market today. One is by all means, LGA, and the other one is a PGA. Very good. One is called a land grid array. One is called a pin grid array. Here's the secret, folks. One is IBM, one is AMD, right? And all they did was reverse themselves. So the way a socket and a CPU work, that pins touch plates, little tiny plates. So either they put the plates in the socket and your CPU has pins, or they put the pins in the socket and your CPU has plates. Okay? Right. They're exactly the same. The whole concept is the same, but for manufacturing reasons, one of them, I think it was AMD, AMD stayed with the pin configuration, and IBM went with the opposite. They used to all be the same, but for some reason they've changed. And I think the reason they changed, quite frankly, is this. If you're holding a CPU with pins, there is a high likelihood of damage. And that is because a CPU, I thought I had one over here with pins. I don't see one. Oh, here we go. This one's attached to the heat sink. This is pins. And as I pass this around, the one thing you're going to notice is those pins are bent. Right. If you bend a pin and it won't make contact, the whole thing stops working. And these can be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, because they're the most important component in your computer. All right, I'm going to pass. Oh, that one's been tossed around. It probably just got bent up by people just handling it. The pins can move very easily. Now, you can, if you know what you're doing, you can bend a pin back, but most people who try to bend a pin back break the pin. So you're kind of dead in the water, either way. All right, moving on. Next thing is the north bridge. You see the heat sink on there? All right. Do you see south bridge anywhere? Does it have a heat sink on it? Like it. I'm thinking it does. Not all of them do. On the motherboards you have, see if you can find a north and south bridge on the motherboards that are floating around the room. I don't see. Oh, there's one over there. There's one. There are two back here. Okay. Pin grid array. All right. So here's one. Right? What else? Okay. This might be the actual, I don't know. The CPU on this one, I believe, is right here. It plugs in. On this one, here's the CPU. Right. But on this one, it is a very unique design. This one, this would be north bridge. This would be south bridge. Over here, you've got the one closest to the CPU is always going to be the north bridge. The one further away will be the south. Okay? The one closest to the CPU is the north bridge, and they look like little black squares. Right? So right here, this would be your north. This would be your south. Yeah, yeah. And this comes off if you can figure out. You got to push down and out, I think. I don't know. North is closest to the CPU because it's a direct line. North is a direct line to the CPU, and we're going to talk about those lines. Okay, let's move on. CPU fan connector again. You have a second one, but this one's for the CPU. Why do we have a separate connection for the CPU? Well, it's not so much the voltage, it's just that it's close to the CPU, isn't it? That way you don't have these long cables all over the place. So the other fan for the case fans. So if you have more than one case fan, you would plug them in there, and then the CPU has its own dedicated power source. And that also is good because if one goes down, it doesn't shut down your CPU fan. All right. Moving on, screw hole. Boy, there's a great one. Okay. All right. Next comes memory slots. Do you find the memory slots on your motherboard that you have in front of you? Okay. Remember, today, memory slots have release buttons on them. They never used to have that, but they do now. The little tabs. And what they do is you push them down and it lifts the memory out. And then when you want to put the memory in, you just set it in there gently and press down equally on both sides till it snaps in. And most people are afraid to push. But you don't want to be afraid to push, but you have to remember to push down and not wiggle so that you would push out and break or snap it. That would be a problem. All right? Next comes what's called a super I/O, a super input output. Okay? This is to connect up some of your high-speed devices. Next comes a floppy connector, which you probably won't find on today's motherboards, will you? What's that? It is IDE, yeah. Okay. Next to that, the blue one is ATA or IDE. Note there's no S or P in front of ATA. All right. That's an ATA/IDE connector, and that is a multiple pin ribbon connector. Okay, the gray ribbon connectors that we use to connect up our devices. This was very popular 10, 20 years ago. Now we use something different. It is a about 20 pins or something like that. I don't remember exactly how many pins. I don't know why. It's just hard to do. Well, it's next to it, and it's a difference. You can see that the holes are a little bigger, but basically the IDE is also a Molex type plug. Okay, male, female, clicks in, right? All right, next comes the 24-pin ATX power cable. So whoever has the power source can hold up, take a look at that power port. That's the big cable. Who has the? Right there. Okay, so the big white one is your cable for power. That's your ATX power connector, 24-pin. Over next comes the SATA connections. Notice that some are red and some are black. Okay, all right, and then comes the CMOS. Okay, complementary metal oxide. Yeah! All right, Janicia, who has gone through how many computers today just to get to one to work? All right. Superconductor. Okay, complementary metal oxide semiconductor is another word for expensive little battery. They usually charge a lot of money for those batteries. Okay. Next comes something called ATA, which is like, what is that going to connect? ATA is going to connect what? No, not power. ATA connects what? Hard drives, disk drives, and things like that. And this is the ATA RAID. So if you have multiple hard drives in your tower and you're using a redundant array independent drives, that simply means that you are backing up within your own computer. You are running very safely, assuming nobody takes the whole computer. Okay, all right. Next comes system panel connectors. These are the connectors that plug in for the lights on the case. You know, the little green light that says you're running and the red light that says something, that stuff. USB and all that. So anything that's on the case that has wires coming out, that plugs into the motherboard so it gets power so that you have lights on your case, and sometimes fans as well. Who knows what the FWH and PLC is? FWH in look it up. Nobody's holding you back from looking it up. Yes. Firmware hub. That's what FWH is. Whoop, sorry. Okay. So, what do you think that is? What is firmware? Mm, no, mediumware. Okay, where do you think the ROM on a computer is located? It's going to be that FWH in PLCC. That is your read-only memory chip that contains the BIOS, which is basic input-output system. What does that mean? Well, that means that these are the instructions that are permanently written to this memory that stay there even if you turn the power off, that when you power on your computer, that's the first thing that fires up its job. Basic input-output system runs post, power on self-test to make sure all the parts are working. It then checks hardware to make sure all hardware is working. It then checks for an operating system, and then it helps to start the operating system to load. Every computer has it. If BIOS is the overall, and post is a process of that. They do. And if I'm not mistaken, BIOS post. And then shoot, I can't think of it right now. I'll think of it. All right. Yes. That's probably it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see if there's anything else written there. I don't know how they can write things so small. I don't see any other indication, but yeah, I believe that's it. First off, it's going to be next to the CMOS. Why?
Because that little battery keeps it so that it can.
That little battery helps keep everything like your date and your location and some of your basic settings alive. Okay, Southbridge, you've seen. What is a serial port connector? Okay, a serial port connector. Remember, we have lots of different kinds of connectors, right? We have serial, we have parallel, right? This is a serial port connector if you have a device that requires a serial port connection to the motherboard. It's a little bit older hard drive, a little bit older disk drive. USB headers. This is where you plug in USB connections that are on your computer face or in the back. In other words, if you have USB somewhere in the case, there will be a wire that lets you plug them into the motherboard, and these are the USB headers. A header is basically another name for the receptacle for the other end of the plug. Okay? Moving on. Jumpers. Jumpers are kind of unique. They're like pins that stick up, and they're just by themselves, and then a little plastic shield that has connectors embedded in it, and you can slide it over the top of two pins, and it makes the pins loop like a U. It connects the two pins that are next to each other. By doing that, you send power or information down the motherboard in a certain way. So there will be some devices that say you're supposed to be off, on, off. So you would take that plastic piece and you put it over the two middle pins and not the two outside pins. And then you would be off, on, off. Some of you might have a motherboard that has the dip switch. It's a little blue thing with little switches, little toggle switches on it. That's the same thing. What that does is it lets you go off, on, off, on. So the communication is correct between the motherboard and the device. Okay? Yes, same thing as jumpers. Now, if your RAID configuration is SATA based, okay, instead of ATA based, then you have connectors for that. Integrated circuit is there for what? Anybody? Anybody want to look up integrated circuit and see what you get? Yes. Yeah, Donovan, go ahead. Very good. Very good. The integrated circuit is there to make sure that voltages don't change and fry out everything. It's kind of like a fuse. All right, so let's move on. 1394 headers. What's 1394? You get no high five for that one. 1394, it's a type of connection. It's not USB. 1394 is? Nope. Firewire. Firewire is also IEEE 1394. Don't know why PC called it a 1394, other than I think Firewire was probably already copyrighted by Apple or somebody else. I don't know. So they called it a 1394 and printed 1394 on their cases, stuff like that. So a 1394 header means if you have a Firewire connection on your case where you can plug in a Firewire cable, then there's going to be a cable that goes over and plugs into that on the motherboard. All right. Then you have CD in. Oh, I'm sorry. You have SPDIF, which is Phillips. All right. Right. So that's an audio connection, isn't it? It's digital audio. It has its own place on the motherboard. So if you have SPDIF on your device, you're going to have a cable that plugs into that. Now, if you don't have one of those devices, does that mean it won't work because there's a plug-in there's no plug in it? No, it'll just be empty. It's not a big deal, okay? Finally, you have your CD in. Whew, we made it around. Before we go on to the next slide, does anyone have any questions? Because there is a part of the test where you see a picture of a motherboard and you have to identify those particular parts. There will be almost all of these. It is a different picture. You'll see it before the test, so don't worry. But if you don't know these things, how would you be able to know what you're doing inside of a computer, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Where's at the bottom? Where's the ATA RAID? It's the ATA RAID red because there's like a little grill part right above it.
It's red because it's ATA RAID instead of ATA connector. So if somebody's hooking up one hard drive, they would press down and put that in. I have the same picture. It's hard to say if it's part of the plug or not. It could be. Those pins look like they line up. It just may be that that's the case. I can't tell from this picture very well. Okay? But I think that's a great question, though. Michael? what was it, plastic? Come on. What was the plastic lead chip carrier? Okay, got it. All right, here's another picture of a motherboard just to show you. Is there anything here you don't recognize? There's something unique about this one. There is 2 CPUs. Did you even know that could happen? There's 2 independent CPUs. Very much. Yep, and how many of them are USB 3? Why? You see the blue tabs, don't you? Okay, all right. Notice that there is look at the connection for PS2. It's half purple, half green. So either one can go in there, but you can't have both, because what's above it? More USB. And what are they telling you? Right. So they're telling you that if you have both a PS2 mouse and a PS2 keyboard, you get to keep one and go buy something new that's USB. Right? Right. Or wireless. That's okay. You'll notice that there's VGA out and VGA in. How many Ethernet connections are there? That's a lot, isn't it? Why would you need 3 different connections to the internet? This is more than likely a server motherboard. What do servers do? And they need lots of power, and they need lots of thinking and processing. So by putting 2 CPUs in here, 3 connections to the internet, you really have not 1 computer, but 2. Yes. Right. That would need different computers for security reasons. Not 2 in 1 like this is. You would have a server that's nipper, and you would have a server set that's zipper, because they're going to have different firewalls and different levels of protection. Okay? Anytime you try to take one computer and give half of it security and other half you don't, it doesn't work. Right? That's like saying, okay, the house is protected, but the good guy and the bad guy each have keys. So, all right, let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry, what? They're both underneath heat sinks. North bridge is generally larger than a south bridge in most cases, and there's only 1 of each on this computer. Okay? All right. Moving along, here's another one. What do you see about this one? Anything different? Not a lot of expansion slots, huh? Okay. Although you do have 2 PCI Express. Okay. Is huge, isn't it? There's no heatsink or fan on the CPU at this point, and that simply means that it was not installed yet. It would have one. Oh, yeah. Same with the other one. You can see what we're looking at here is this one doesn't even have CPUs in. Okay, those are just slots. Okay, this one has the CPU in, but as you can see, there's no fan or anything on it right now, but that all would be done at the final level of installation. Yeah. Liquid cooled. Yeah, I suppose. It would be rare though. I think it would be rare. I mean, unless you're running some extraordinarily high-powered services and you're needing it. Gamers are the only ones that are really using those things that I know of because of the graphics, CPU crunching they're doing. So here's one more. There's like 4 PCIe. Okay. Look at all the heat sinks around the CPU, and the CPU is not currently installed. I just want you to see that there's not one style of a motherboard, is there? There is no one style of motherboard, although there are different shapes, right? Okay, and there may be different colors as well. And the reason for that is, once again, how big is the footprint of the computer? I mean, if it's a tower that stands this high off the ground, your motherboard can be that big. Okay, but if it's something that's small or a desktop or an all-in-one or a laptop, you have to shrink. All right. So we have learned about the different types of features of the motherboard. Now we're going to have to learn how to set up BIOS. We're going to talk about physical jumpers, okay, and select, install, and replace a motherboard. A motherboard is considered an FRP. A hard drive is considered an FRP. A CMOS battery is considered an FRP. A power supply is considered an FRP. Field replaceable unit. That simply means anything that you can remove and put something new in is an FRP. You cannot FRP North Bridge. Yes. You cannot replace a north or south bridge. You cannot repair a bus. Okay? These things require replacing the motherboard, not fixing them on the site. You're not going to go out there with a soldering iron and desolder 35 or 40 connections, pull out a processor, put another one in up. That is simply not considered something you would do in the field. Okay? Come on, faster. You guys have anything on your screen yet? I don't. What do you have? Well, oh, there it is. Okay. All right. Do you see what it says about the motherboard? Do you agree? All right. Do you guys still have a motherboard in front of you? I want you to look at the bottom of it on the back side. Look at the back side of the motherboard. And careful doing it. What do you see? You can turn it over. I don't think anything's going to fall off. Oh, that's all right. What else do you see? You see a lot of solder connections, don't you? What about the board itself? What do you see? Lines. Those lines are called buses. Buses. It has nothing to do with the beast you rode to school in. A bus is a highway. Look at that board. And does it not look like it could be a Google view of streets in a neighborhood or something? If you look carefully, you can follow any of those gold buses from one location to another. That's data traveling over those circuits, over that material, over that gold. Why do you think, people say, well, we just don't want to throw these things in the trash can. There's precious metals, right? Gold is a precious metal, isn't it? I mean, they can take these things, melt them down, and pull out the different metals and separate them and reuse that stuff. Now there's also dangerous metals, okay, in things like this, okay? So the point is that we don't just throw these in the trash can, we recycle them every chance we get. So look, the back of that motherboard tells the story. If you had a microscope, okay, and you could zoom in, you would see some detail you wouldn't believe. Now guess what? If I gave you an actual chip, which I will bring this afternoon for you so you can see one, an actual chip that is a CPU chip without all its casing on it, and you could put it under a microscope, it would look like the back of that motherboard. Thousands of little tiny bus lines traveling back and forth. Well, at least it was people. Yeah, the microscopic world is one that impresses me very much. Okay? It just tells you the truth. Size doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't matter. All right. Stop giggling. I wasn't talking about that. All right. Take a look at the Mini ATX or Mini ITX, sorry. The reason that heatsink looks so large is because the motherboard is so small. That's all. So this would be a small desktop computer, wouldn't it? But again, the purpose of a heatsink is to transfer heat away from the CPU, and aluminum, heat travels across the aluminum very fast. Resistance. Right. Okay. Yep. You couldn't do plastic, could you? And you can't do steel because heat doesn't travel very well through steel at all. Okay. So in this case, the best solution. Now there's no fan, but in a unit this small, a case fan would be sufficient. Right. It would be sufficient. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. All right. Now, I won't stay on this too long because you can come back and read this when I make this available back in the course for you. But you can see that we have a 12-inch, a 9-inch, a 6-inch, okay? And then it repeats itself, 9, 12. There's a 10-inch micro BTX, a Pico means small in Italian, 8-inch, and an NLX. So somebody was asking me the other day, is this just like ATX and mini ATX and micro ATX? I said, no, but there are many others. Okay, now you can look at the board, and on somewhere on that board, it's going to tell you ATX, micro, mini ATX, BTX, or whatever. Okay, the most common is ATX. It's an open standard, and anybody can copy it without violating copyright. All right. Okay. More than likely, yes. Or small desktops. There are little towers. You know, they're no bigger than a sewing machine or a big toaster. I mean, they really are smaller. Not necessarily, but possibly. Okay, because remember, laptops and phones, they kind of have their own design for what they call a motherboard, and they're very, very small. I've taken a lot of Apple phones apart and looked at the circuit boards. I even have a drone. I have a drone at home that I took the circuit postage stamp. If you think about what my drone can do off a postage stamp circuit board, it's pretty impressive. Yeah. If I have time, I'll see if there's anything we can do. All right. Who remembers what BIOS stands for? Don't talk out loud. Try to answer. This is to kind of get you back engaged now because you guys have been doing great. Nobody's tired today. What went different? Did you guys get some sleep last night? Mo? You're supposed to answer on here. That's okay. You're right, Mo. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Anybody else want to see these things? We'll pass them to you, or he's going to put them on the table. They're always on the table if you want to go back and take a closer look. Anytime. BIOS. BIOS. We call it BIOS. We say BIOS. It's a very simple acronym. And knowing what it means tells somebody you know what you're talking about. Okay? If you can't explain BIOS to a coworker or to a supervisor, that leaves you open to be judged as to whether or not you really do know what you say you know, right? Remember, language is a very powerful resource. I know people who know all these terms, like my 13-year-old twins. They know all these terms, and they sound like geniuses when they talk to people. But they wouldn't be able to find it on a motherboard. They couldn't turn it on and fix it on a computer. They're not there yet, right? They just hear me grading papers, talking about things, and they go, "What is that, Dad? What is BIOS?" And I say, "Well, this is what it does. Where it is." Oh, okay, cool. And then they go, "I don't want to know anymore." All right, so I have most everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. And the correct answer is basic input-output system. If you got that, that's great. If you didn't, try to remember that, because that could show up on a test. All right? Which of the following are popular form factors for motherboards? We discussed it about 5 minutes ago. So hopefully that's still fresh in your short-term memory, and you're going to throw it to your long-term memory. You got to get it off RAM and store it on your hard drive. So of the choices that you have, okay, so far everybody who has answered correctly, I think. Not everybody's done answering, but you probably can check more than one if there's more than one choice. So far, I have 4 correct answers. What? That's okay. I'm not worried about that. I'm not using that at the moment. You can look at some pretty pictures in the meantime. Yeah? Come on. Is there some reason people aren't answering? God. Okay, so that's probably why this went down too. I don't have anything on mine either. The YU student 5G? Oh, yeah, yeah. There isn't anything. How many are hardwired? Are you guys still live? Yeah, you're still good? I want to sneak over and look at the hotspot and see if it's down. Usually when I start doing this, everything comes back up. It just came back up. See? The minute, mine's back up too. The minute I go to find the problem, it comes back up. Okay, finish answering, please. Who here is still having fun? Not everybody, but a few. What's that? I help with that by repeating things frequently and hoping that that will help you with that ability. What I would do is make 10 or 15 minutes a day where you scan through your notes, skip over things you're sure of, and just read things you're not sure of one more time. That's all. Don't spend more than 10 or 15 minutes because you will build anxiety, right? So it's just 10 or 15 minutes where you're going to go, I'm just going to clear my head of all the rest of the problems in my life. I'm going to sit down and just look at this for a while, and then I'm going to go back to what I want to do. Okay? Yeah. What? I started bald and then grew hair? In the essence of time, I'm going to move forward. Okay? I'm just going back, trying to get the screen to show here. What do you have? Just a thank you. I'm not able to send anything at the moment. How about now? Do you have something? I wonder if I'm even. I know I'm connected, but I don't know if I'm connected. What can I do? Can I wish following restore? All right. Okay, even though I'm showing Wi-Fi, I'm not connecting back to the. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to reconnect to NearPod. See, it's coming off and turning on, coming off, turning on. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. One second. Here's what I'm going to do. We're on this question. I'm going to go ahead and stop. We'll pick up from here when we come back later today. Okay. Once again, on I've got to. I'll make arrangements, but we're going to try to get more of you hardwired, and I'm going to go reset the wireless access point. I'm going to restart it so that maybe whatever its problem is will clear. Just like at home with your router, the first thing they tell you to do is to unplug it, wait 30 seconds, and then restart it. Computers are the same way. Computers can run slow because they haven't been restarted, shut down. They're still trying to do too many things in the background. So remember that. That's always a go-to solution. Does not have a hard drive, but it has circuitry. It has a mini motherboard, if you will. Okay. We don't call it a motherboard unless it's really in a computer with a CPU. Otherwise, it's just called a circuit board when it doesn't have a brain. Okay. So still very smart, yeah. So I'm gonna give you a few minutes here. Would you take a look at what assignments are coming up, if you can, if you are connected? Yeah. See, I'm letting you know now, folks. I'm letting you know now because you need to budget your time for these videos. I mean, the reason I don't show them in class, to be honest with you, is they don't work that way. Because you guys, that's an opportunity to get tired, to get tuned out, which you could still do watching them at home. But I think the opportunity to sit down where you want to sit, where you're comfortable, where you want to get away from the world and block out everything and just do something different, you're more likely to remember what's on those videos. Now, also, remember, it's 2 paragraphs, not one real big one. It's 2 paragraphs minimum. So if you've got more to say, feel free. You can say more. Yes, please. Yes. Hmm? Did I say anything? And yours, okay. I'll say something if it's not. I promise. All right. 210, yeah. Okay, you got about 6 minutes or so. And if you want to do something or if you have something else you want to work on, I'm going to go next door and unplug the access point. Yes. Let me just double check and see which one I put up. Where's your? Oh, God, I couldn't even find it there. Did you? I want to see if this is the test one or not. No, that's the one we were looking at. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I certainly hope that the recording wasn't affected.
Are the recordings just like where all the